that's cash strapped in Amazon's warehouses. You've got long-term fees, now sell-through fees all coming in. And this is where, as much as you may give up on margin, it actually just opens up a lot more cash flow for these guys, right? They're selling a lot more units, they're moving this inventory out, it frees up their pockets. And by them making 2, 3x more in profit, they're able to actually reallocate that money into their business, into their product lines that are performing, double down, bring the right inventory in. Net net, it's actually a much more profitable business than it was before, right?
Hello, hello. Welcome to today's edition of Trellis Live. My name is Ali Babel, Chief Evangelist here at Trellis. We have Dennis, the VP of Data Science co-founder, and also Sri Teja Srivastavai, Mr. Teja himself, head of e-commerce growth. Super stoked to have you both. These two guys are the OGs. They've been around since Trellis since day one. Have been through all of the Prime days and worked with I don't even know how many brands at this point through their Prime Day planning strategies and everything in between. Gents, super grateful to have you. Thanks for joining us. It's going to be a fun topic.
Great to be here with you both.
Always a pleasure, guys.
All right, all right. And so we're gonna jump into it because this is a big one. This is a question that we get asked all the time coming into Prime Day, also after Prime Day. I think Dennis, you were saying you got a couple emails already asking the same question, but fundamentally, is Prime Day worth it? Like, are we at the point where we believe that it's not worth it? Is it worth it? We're gonna dive into it. We're gonna look into it. But let's start. What did we see on Prime Day? I'll throw to you, Dennis, first.
Yeah, I mean, across the board, we saw a really good uplift in top line sales to start off with across most of the brands. Most of the brands were seeing double, if not more. For us, kind of working directly with a bunch of brands, we had a war room set up here for the 2 days. We were kind of constantly monitoring intraday what was playing out, making adjustments, handling calls from the clients and whatnot. Obviously, those are the most active participants, those most active participating brands on the day. And so for those brands, they saw a really significant uplift, as we'll see in some of the numbers here. But there were definitely some cases, a lot of 5x to kind of 6x kind of range. But we also saw a couple of cases where it was into the double digits. So some really, really strong kind of top line numbers that were playing out on the 2 days, which made for a pretty busy couple of days for us here.
Yeah, absolutely. Taylor, what about yourself? What'd you see?
I think the same thing there, but even there, right? This year's Prime Day was the biggest, and you could see a lot of the brands who participated. They've kind of exceeded 2023 numbers by mid-afternoon of day one, right? And not even double digits. A lot of these guys were doing 10 to 16 to 20x growth as well, which is great to see.
Yeah, like I think what Amazon put out the numbers there, right? Like 14.2 billion in total GMV, right? Like that's what was that? Like 11% increase year over year. Like that's a significant number. More people know about Prime Day
Yeah,
than ever as well, right? Like,
for sure.
and then we're also seeing all of the other marketplaces kind of follow along. Like July seems to be this like sale month, right? Like Walmart deal days. There was the Target Circle week, right? Like every Nordstrom had their sale. I was in Europe for like the first week of July there, and like everything was on sale as well, and all retail too. And so I think July is becoming this like big sale time, but Prime Day exceeding really the market share, especially in the U.S. Right? Like I think out of that GMV, 8 billion was moved on Amazon.com in 2 days.
Yeah,
In two
exactly.
days.
A
Like
lot of
that's
product moved.
a lot of product moved,
We were
right?
we were getting calls from clients about how they were having to kind of summon up additional trucks just to handle all the additional volume. I think it exceeded a lot of our brand's plans to be honest in some cases, and so so they had to react pretty quickly based on what was coming in.
Yeah, it's that interday changes, right? Like grateful for us to be able to have this data available to us. Like I know every single CS person here was on the team was had our dashboard open, and with the hourly data they're getting through Marketing Stream,
Yeah.
it really allows you to be able to pivot. But let's see some of the data that we were coming in. And for those of you that follow me, you would have seen this last week. We're going to go through it a little bit more as well to kind of set the stage, but overall, if we look at impressions hour over hour compared to an average, in obviously massive increase in eyeballs, massive increase in people shopping. But that
Yeah.
4 p.m. time on that first day just took off.
Yeah. Yeah. The traffic was high right out of the gate, and you can see that here through the impressions and the clicks that followed through. There was a lot of shopping happening right out of the gate, and so that's the really strong kind of rise that we saw early on the Tuesday, and then as we got into the primetime hours later in the evening, then people were. There seemed to be like basically an additional rush. We've seen this play out in past Prime days, so it was not terribly surprising from an overall pattern perspective, but a late day rush as shoppers were kind of firming up their decisions on what they wanted to buy and pulling the trigger ultimately. And so we kind of saw similar patterns play out on the conversion side as well.
And
Yeah,
that's the
makes
thing,
sense.
right? It's important to last the entire day here, especially as you see these peaks later into the day. People get off work, they're trying to buy. This is where all the impulse buys are happening. So it's crucial that you got that full coverage across the board there.
Right. And so back to the kind of the intraday kind of monitoring, the access to AMS data to be able to kind of see what's playing out hour by hour is really to make sure that those all important ad campaigns that are supporting the deals are kind of remaining in budget and serving throughout the day. So that's something that our team was kind of constantly monitoring throughout the day as the day progressed as well.
And if we look at kind of the like, let's look at total sales numbers here as well. Like, big surge in the morning, right?
Right.
It's people knew what they wanted. People had things added to their cards, saved, list like on their lists. Like, people came in there knowing that they wanted to buy something and knew what they were going to be after to see those deals.
And we saw that playing actually setting itself up during the lead-in window, where some of the conversion rates kind of softened somewhat in the days preceding the start of the event. And I think, that's where, and again, we've seen a similar pattern in past Prime days as well. So what's happening there is the shoppers kind of forming their opinions of, they're starting to do some pre-browsing, if you will, starting to form their opinions on what it is they want to buy. And as you can see right here, as soon as the event opens up, then they're ready to hit the trigger and make those purchases. So we saw strong conversions right out of the gate.
Yeah, and even this like tailwind at the end here, right? Like, it kind of day two started kind of even lower than day one here, and then by the end of the day, like, to be quite honest, I actually came into it. I really wanted this charcoal insert for my barbecue, and I've been following for some time. I've been looking at it. I'm like, okay, it's going to go on sale during Prime Day, guarantee it. Did not go on sale. Did not buy it, but in turn was like very much. I wanted to buy something because I knew things were on sale. And everyone says, there's reference pricing and all that fun stuff too. I obviously have access to our Trellis Chrome extension that shows me historical prices as well, so I can kind of do some informed buying there. If you don't have the Trellis Seller Chrome extension, absolutely download it. It has some really solid information around pricing, promotions, ads, content as well, and giving you that kind of like that share of voice, share of shelf, everything in between. Anyways, seller extension, Trellis Seller extension, download it. It helps as a consumer as well as a brand owner to look at historical pricing data. But I actually bought all my stuff on that second day. Like, if we look at those total sales of that, I think it was 6 o'clock right after I finished work, and bought like 2 or 3 days.
Yeah. Where were you buying these products? Were you on the deals page? Were you just searching up for these products? What were you doing?
Yeah, that's actually a solid question. So I wasn't searching for anything because the thing that I really wanted was like not available. Right. And so I actually was just scrolling the deal pages
to buy some. So you kind of exemplified the FOMO effect that we were seeing across the consumer.
Yeah. So FOMO was definitely real for me, for sure. I didn't want to lose out on anything that I didn't have sight into, or I forgot that I wanted or needed there as well. But it absolutely was.
Yeah. It's a very real effect, and there's no other way to explain kind of the late day surge that we always see on day two, and it really showed itself strong on this event. Was just the shopper kind of making that last ditch purchase decision because they fear that they're going to miss out on the deals when the event closes.
Yeah, one of the other interesting things that I think we saw here was the conversion rate for ad conversion rate, like had like a massive uptick at 11 o'clock on that second day, where people were like, hold on, let me see what's on sale. And so if you weren't supporting your deals with ads, you were missing out. Like there definitely is a component there, and so hopefully everybody was.
Yeah.
Um,
And this
I
is
know it's
where
a
it
big
was
one.
important, right? Is you have to make sure you're advertising the ones that are on deals or PEDs and advertising the promotional ones where you have these discounts because that's where you're going to sustain the conversions because every brand is doing that, right? So if you advertise a product that's not being promoted, you're going to lose out. And to a certain extent, it's just wasted ad spend, which could be used effectively elsewhere, right? So that's where it's
Yeah.
that balance between ads and promotions is key to make Prime Day successful.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Like a shopper like me who's going to hit the deal pages, I'll definitely bump up your organic. For a shopper that's looking for things specifically, they're going to be coming in. They're going to see those ads, right, and those deals off those ads, and your sponsored ads there too, right? So, but overall, everything was up, right? Paid was up, organic was up, traffic was up. Um,
And that's no surprise, right, Elio? I mean, we see that every year where on Prime Day the top line numbers are all up, and so sales are up, impressions, clicks, all the traffic numbers are all up. But the question then remains: is it still worth it? Because the brands are also leaning into it with additional investment on
yeah,
on deals, on discounting. So
yeah,
is it
like
worth
even
it?
for the both of you, like how many months before Prime Day were you already getting into these conversations with brands?
Three, 4
One,
months in advance.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. Let alone, I think even our own war room, like Prime Day takes a very strong emotional and arguably physical toll on those brand managers, on you guys, on our CS team, on everybody involved,
Yeah.
and the level of stress, right? Like I think Tasia, you had said it best after that first day, but there's a lot riding on it.
Exactly. It's high pressure, high stakes, but high reward, right? And it's a lot of planning, forecasting, inventory planning, thinking about your promotionals, getting the reference price, making
Yeah.
sure your PEDs don't get suppressed by Amazon. Blood, sweat, and tears go into it, but they all pay out at the end of it.
Make sure you got
Yeah.
the stock in place.
Exactly.
'Cause-
Yeah. At the very least, right?
Yeah.
It's funny you say blood, sweat, and tears, but I think the Trellis office ran out of coffee at around 4 p.m. on the first day.
That's when the Red Bulls came in.
There you go. There you go. And so if you don't, it requires a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and caffeine, very clearly there too. But to answer that question, is Prime Day worth it? Like that's why we're all here. That's what we've been looking at. Fine, everything is up, but what does worth it mean then? Like we can see all these numbers, we can see all these stats. We assume that everyone's participating in Prime Day. We look at these pieces, and so when we actually set out to answer that question, and because we get asked it so much, and we think about it ourselves, the dimensions and the parameters that we looked at were like we can look at everything. We have so much data, we have so many data signals. Let's actually break this down into a different way. Where one, looking at our participant versus non-participant, so brands that actively participated versus brands that didn't, and we'll define how we broke that out. The overall GMV that moved, the changes in BSR as well towards that time period, and also overall profit. At the end of the day, if your profit is king, I can say that time and time and again. Everyone can say that time and time and again. But profit is king, and so
And that's
looking at these numbers will give us: is it worth it?
Yeah, and that's honestly the single biggest hesitation, I think, or maybe question that brands have coming into an event like this as to whether or not they should participate. It comes down to that profit point at the end. At the end of the day, what they're most concerned about is great. I mean, these key shopping events are awesome. They drive all kinds of traffic, but at the end of the day, if all I'm doing is just transferring all of that upside over to the marketplace, then what's in it for me, and why should I put the effort into it? So
Yeah.
so really, at the end of the day, that's what matters, and it's important that we look at it through that lens.
Yeah, and it's there's a whole component there of like the time worth it too, right? And if you get higher GMV, better BSR, and more profit, yeah, probably the time is worth it. But let's actually break that down, because I think there are a lot of brands that actually have like the brand FOMO side of this,
Yeah,
right? Where it's like everyone else is doing Prime Day, I probably should too, which isn't an acceptable reason
exactly.
to participate in Prime Day by any means.
Exactly, and they don't, and it's hard, right? It's not an easy, it's not an obvious answer to that question, and so what they're left kind of struggling with is, do I just follow the herd because everyone else is doing it, and if I do it, then am I really coming away with kind of net profit or net gain at the end of the day. That might not be obvious on the top line numbers that everyone publishes, everyone hears about, that top level GMV number that Amazon puts out. That's all great, but what's in it for the brand is sometimes not quite as clear.
And I think that herd mentality, right? Let's actually evaluate that and do that. And we looked at all the brands within the Trellis portfolio, and this actually shocked us.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's ones that we work with, of course. There's ones that leverage the platform on their own as well. And we work with all of them, of course, in different ways. But only 55% of brands participated in Prime Day, right? Like 45% did not, right? So this like adage, and everyone talks about it, lead up to it. There's all these like, LinkedIn posts, blog posts, social posts, Prime Day's coming, Prime Day's coming, Prime Day's coming. But really, one out of every two brands, and I'll put one of those squiggly lines before the one out of every two, don't participate. Like they actually don't participate, and so
it's surprising. And we're seeing that. I think that we're seeing the ratio of participation increase somewhat, but it's still surprisingly low, and there's still a significant number of brands here that don't participate. Actually, for our viewers, it might be helpful to understand how we look at kind of participation. What do we mean by a participant versus a non-participant? So I think this is important for us to kind of evaluate what is the benefit of participating. Well, to do that, we need to kind of maybe divide the group of brands into kind of participant, non-participant categories. So what we do there is we look at, we deem a participating brand to be a brand that it has discounted at least 5% of their catalog by 5% or more of a discount depth, and invested in some degree of incremental ad spend. So we set the threshold at a 10% increase in ad spend investment, coupled with some amount of discounting, 5% or more of discounting of their catalog. So
they increased their spend, and they had at least a 5% discount off their ASP for those brands. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So we deem those to be the participants. That gives us about a 55% mix across a random sample of brands that we took across our data, and then 45% of those are non-participants. So then the question is, who wins out of?
Yeah, exactly, right. Who won throughout it? And we'll go through it, and actually throughout the rest of this, we're actually going to go through these two groups: participant data and non-participant data, and how the GMV, the BSR, the profit numbers came in. But what is interesting is that even the criteria that we're using here is a very low threshold for participation.
Right.
It's not that it's a high threshold by any
we didn't set a high bar. Yeah, exactly.
So there really is no participation, like minimal participation from the ones that we're calling non-participations.
Yeah. So, Teja, you can probably speak to some examples of brands that eclipsed our participation criteria.
Yeah. It was crazy. A lot of these guys were doing more than 5% discounts, right? They were doing 20 to 30% discounts across the catalog. They were tripling, 4xing their typical ad spends across the board. And they're seeing that 10 to 16x. I just got a call from one of the brands, and they're telling me they're ordering another 8 containers because they blew out their forecast in terms of inventory that was being sold, right? So that's the benefits of some of these participants is they're able to move slow movers out of their inventory. They're able to get bestsellers, improve their rankings across the whole, and get a lot more brand presence and share, right?
Yeah.
Those are just some of the benefits of participating, honestly.
We actually did look at a distribution of discount depths. What we see is most brands discounted somewhere in the range of 5% of the participating group. Let's say most of the brands discounted anywhere from 5% to about 25% or so. Then there's a significant drop off after that. So that's kind of gives the viewer a bit of a range of what we see as far as discount rates.
And don't forget, there are brands. Right. There are brands actually in the non-participant side that really just can't participate, right? Like lower margins, tighter margins.
Right.
How Colgate shouldn't really be participating in Prime Day. Like, I don't know how many more toothpaste. I didn't even search for toothpaste on Prime Day.
Yeah.
Right. But there's just some categories that it doesn't make sense for, and some brands that doesn't make sense for. But it's still 45% is still a lot of brands that aren't participating.
Right. Yeah, and not everyone can, like as you pointed out, not every brand can necessarily swing those 10 to 20 to 30% discounts. So that can make the difference between profitability or not for them. So it's not all necessarily a fit for everyone.
So let's look at sales, right? Like total GMV that moved, right? And so what the data that you're going to see here, and each one of the graphs that we've kind of pulled together here will incorporate the same kind of time horizon where to evaluate the worth of it, you're looking at a lead in and a lead out period. What were the sales beforehand? What was the Prime Day sales? And then what was the sales that came after that? Same thing with profit, same thing with PSR, because it's in isolation, it doesn't give you the fullest picture, right? And there are impacts to brands both on the lead in and lead out periods, and brands that participated and didn't participate. And so the fullness of the picture is really important here, right? And overall, I think we saw about a 30% sales increase compared to the reference period. But Dennis, maybe talk to us a bit more about some of the brands that didn't participate. Let's talk about those numbers specifically.
Yeah, actually, let's speak a little bit about the reference period. So what we're doing here in this comparison is we're looking at how did brands execute through the event window, and we define the event window as the 2 days of Prime Day itself, 4 days leading in, 4 days leading out. And then what we wanted to do is compare that to an equivalent time period. So we've offset the reference period 28 days in the past, so from June 14th to June 23rd, basically capturing that same 10-day window over the same days of week. So we're normalizing for weekday patterns that inevitably play out in many categories, and then just doing a comparison. How did the GMVs grow? How did profits perform? How did BSRs perform over those comparison periods? So that's what we're going to get into here. So here on the top
you had that distinction there.
Sorry,
I'm going to jump in here. I'm glad you had the distinction there, and also making sure. Well, let's reference that before we actually go into this data. This is why Dennis is our king of data, the goat of data, and making sure we all understand how we're comparing these things, because it's important to look at that. And so in that reference period between the two groups, between the participants and the non-participants, there was really only a difference of about 3% in the total GMV. Right? Yeah. So that 28-day window from before, a 10-day window that happened there was really only a 3% difference in overall sales between those two groups, which is
exactly. So that helped our analysis a lot, right? Because what it did is confirm that basically we're starting from a reference period where both groups of brands are on a level playing field. They both had similar profitability, similar sales, and so forth. So when we look at then how do those two groups perform through the Prime Day event window, we can really start to see the contrast of what happened to the participating group versus what happened to the non-participating group. So that starts here with the GMV chart that we've got up, where essentially in the lead-in window, we had pretty similar performance between the participating group and the non-participating group. But then you really see the difference as we come into the 2 days of Prime Day, and the participating group really takes off, more than doubling the GMV performance for the non-participating group rather. And then furthermore, on a top line GMV basis, we see the tailwind effect coming into the lead out period, where even after the event is done, we see some measurable growth on the participating group as compared to the non-participating group. So that was kind of an interesting kind of tailwind.
Yeah. The tailwinds are a real thing here, right? Like, and Tasia, maybe talk to us about what some of those deltas that we're seeing between the participants versus the non-participants.
I think the biggest thing is all the lead in there, right? A lot of the participant groups actually jumped on the deal wagon, right? They did all the deals, all the promotional activities to build that mind share, start to tease the consumers and shoppers to say, look, we're doing something big here, wait out for the next 2 days, right? So you can see that slight ramp up. And that's where the participants are 2-3x more than non-participants, right? That's where they're moving all the volume. And what they're actually doing is continuing to do that because it's a weekday, right? People sometimes work, they can't get to it. Even at night, they just don't do it. So they're really still buying going into the weekend post-Prime, right? So they're still doing those discounts at a smaller rate, but they're getting that tailwinds, right? So their averages post-Prime are still higher than the lead-ins and that reference period that we're referring to, right? So they're building that and piggybacking off of that momentum and going forward.
I think that's an interesting point you mentioned there, right? Like that the participant group actually is running deals leading up to Prime Day. Then they're running their Prime Day deals, and then they're also running deals again on the lead out. Yeah. They have full promotional coverage during this 10-day window. But I think we saw that translate, right? Like this delta here, about 1.2x higher sales in the lead out, 20% more sales.
Right.
And that's the thing is like it's no longer a prime day, it's prime week,
Yeah.
right? Treat it as a longer window and piggyback off of that.
Yeah, and I can think of at least a half a dozen brands or more that were running very much running awareness, dedicated awareness campaigns leading into the event as well, just trying to draw more attention to a combination of their brand, their store page, but also to the products that were going to be featured in deals through the event itself,
Yeah.
and getting a head start on those on that awareness a week to 2 weeks in advance. So there was some ad investment happening there too.
It's that full funnel advertising strategy. Lead in with the awareness, do your SBs, your SDs, put some
Yeah.
DSP in there as well, right? Start to retarget those guys, especially on the post side is people who didn't get to buy during Prime Day. Let's go after them and convince them again afterwards, right? So it's important.
Add to carts.
Exactly.
Let's hit all the add to carts. Right now's the time.
Exactly.
People who didn't get it for that reason, and probably should and may still want to get it, even irrespective of there being a deal or not. And on that similar note, like whether you participated or didn't, and actually the non-participants still had an overall lift.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's an important observation, right? As much as it was a super strong day for the participating group, the non-participating groups had a very decent day as well. They basically essentially doubled their normal daily revenues without putting a whole lot of investment as far as deal investment or substantial ad investment into those days. Maybe a little bit of incremental budget, but that would have been about it for the non-participating group, and yet they still saw the benefit of a doubling of their top line. So
And so then let's actually look at what that means from a profit standpoint then, right? And so we pulled the same numbers looked across all of our brands here. We've accounted for COGS because you can put that into the Trellis platform, fees as well from the Amazon side, and also ad spend, right? So we've kind of taken out all of the elements here. Totally could be known as contribution margin, depending on how you're looking at it. But this is like an aggregate, also probably your total contribution dollars. And the reference period prior to that between these two groups, the interesting note here is that the non-participants had a 1.2x higher profit than the participants in the reference period. And so
right.
keep that in mind as we go through this. And I'm actually going to bring in Teja in here. Teja talks about the participants and how they fared on a profit standpoint here.
And I think it's important, right? That non-participants are having greater profits in that lead in because they're just not tapping into a lot of the ad spend, right? They're not building that awareness. They're not doing those promotional activities as much. So they've got margins and room to play with versus the ones who are building that, right? They're building that up. They're spending more. They're starting to ramp up.
Yeah.
But really, as much as they're losing it, they're not worried because if you look at that Prime Day window, 2x more in terms of profit, and they just make up even more profit than what they've lost, plus incremental sum, and then that kind of carry forwards out into the post aspect as well, right? And it slowly starts to get equal with the non-participants, but you just end up net making more money regardless, right? So it becomes worth it for these guys particularly.
So you made an interesting point, right? That participants actually had less profit in this lead-in window, whereas the non-participants actually had more profit. Wasn't the same on Prime Day, and clearly wasn't the same on the lead out. Well, arguably wasn't the same on lead out there.
Right.
Dennis, talk to us about the non-participants here. Talk to us about the lift that they saw for the
just to echo a similar point, I think that the non-participants, as we talked about, had slightly better margins in both in the reference period as well as in the 4 days leading into the event that you can see here. It's just a slight advantage, but it's slight, and I think as Teja pointed out, the profit gain that the participant group saw through the 2 days was really, really solid as we can see here. But still, nonetheless, again, just as we talked about on the previous slide, for what is relatively a passive strategy of just riding the wave, the non-participants still saw upwards of it was about a 90% increase in profitability there, just basically riding on the coattails of all the work that the marketplace did and all the participating brands did. So with relatively little lift, they still saw some benefit here through the window.
So if you didn't participate, right, and did nothing on Prime Day, you still made more money in your pocket.
Right.
I'm feeling like we're going to get a little biased here when we try to answer this question, but I think the aggregate numbers are really interesting, right? Like if we take the aggregate of the total profit during this window versus for participants and non-participants, the delta between those is substantial, right?
Yep.
Like it's the
Yep.
participants win on profit by a long shot.
By a long
Correct
shot.
me if I'm
Yeah.
wrong here.
Yeah. They more than make up for it.
Yeah,
I think it was
and
what, 88% higher compared to that reference period.
yeah, I think it worked out to about that, right? That 88% higher on the reference period. But if we look at the overall profit for this period, the prime day, like 10-day period here,
Yep.
there's about 56%.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, exactly.
56% higher of the overall profit went to the people who actually participated in Prime Day, right? Which is similar to the numbers for participation as well, but it's they made up for it and won, even with the lower numbers leading in. But what's the impact on cash flow? Teja, talk to me about that.
I think that's where it is, right? A lot of these brands, especially one of our brands, right, is they've got so much inventory on deck, especially those slow moving products that just people don't move or can't move. That's cash strapped in Amazon's warehouses. You've got long term fees, now sell through fees all coming in. And this is where, as much as you may give up on margin, it actually just opens up a lot more cash flow for these guys, right? They're selling a lot more units, they're moving this inventory out, it frees up their pockets. And by them making 2, 3x more in profit, they're able to actually reallocate that money into their business, into their product lines that are performing, double down, bring the right inventory in. Net, it's actually a much more profitable business than it was before, right? And Prime Day is one of those periods, right? Black Friday, Prime Day, where just because of the sheer volume of people coming in, perfect time to get rid of dead inventory.
Yep. And it's the furthest thing from being a distress clearance too, right? I mean, you can see it right here, just how profitable it was, right? So they're driving deep into their inventory and clearing out that inventory while still remaining very, very profitable in the process. So it's really, really good for the brand that way.
And this is where that months in planning comes in handy, right? Figuring out that reference price. How do you make sure you're still giving a discount, but you're still profitable? Finding that balance.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely, right. And so I think so we've looked at profit, we looked at revenue or GMV, we looked at total profit here as well. I think BSR is the next beat here because I think that's going to be a big driver or something that we should understand. So in the reference period prior to this 10-day window, we had the participant average was 14 from a BSR perspective, and non-participant was 10. And what we looked at here to be able to pull this BSR data, because there's so many products, so many catalogs, we looked at the median of the top 10 percentile of products within brands. So really, we're looking at their best sellers, right? And for the brands that participated, and also for the brands that didn't participate, it's what are that top 10 percentile of products that exist for them that would arguably be their best ranking products as well.
Yeah.
And so coming into this, not too far off. The delta wasn't too far in
Actually,
that
it's very,
reference
very
period.
similar. There's maybe 2 points separating the two groups there in the reference period. So
And so the lead in, actually, this is interesting, right? Like the lead in kind of followed the similar delta trend here, but the non-participants, and don't be mistaken for this number going up. Higher BSR is bad. Don't forget. But you can see how it slowly started hitting, right? Like the Prime Day the Prime Day participants actually had a pretty leveling out approach here, and actually got better on that tailwind on that last day, right, of their best sellers. Whereas your non-participants, it got worse, right? Like,
Yeah.
fine, you were profitable, fine, you didn't participate, but your BSR got worse,
Yeah.
and actually by quite a lot than where it was before, right? And so, and then also continuing that, right? Fine, there was a bit of a drop then, but it's arguably a sustained level of worseness. And so, Dennis, maybe you want to talk about this from the non-participant side.
Yeah, obviously this is maybe, of all the comparisons that we've looked at so far, this is maybe the game changer for a lot of brands is that by not participating, the non-participants actually give up that rank, and in some cases that might be appropriate for what it is that they're trying to do, but for some brands, I hazard a guess that is a bit painful, and something that they need, they're going to need some time to recover from. So this is definitely something to take into consideration here. The non-participants have lost some ground, at least in the 4-day lead out window, with respect to organic rank, with respect to BSR rank. And now they've got to basically catch back up, and I think that provides a bit of a foundation for the participating group to be able to build on. So
Yeah,
And
and Teja, why don't you hit it from the participating side?
I think, correct me wrong, if I think this is where, especially if I look at the supplements category as an example, right, where a lot of new to brand and repeat purchases is where you make your money. And if you're losing market share by not participating, you're actually losing new to brand customers for your business. So now what happens is your repeat purchases are going to start to decline as well over that long period, and that's where you can kind of see that tailwinds where the non-participants are still losing BSR versus the ones who participate are actually piggybacking off of that, right? They're getting that momentum, building that new to brand, where really it's actually, as much as your short term, your BSR is kind of give or take steady state. It's really the month one, the month two, the month three afterwards where you're going to see significant growth in your business.
Yeah, and I think that then the non-participants are kind of battling uphill here, right?
Correct.
yeah, at least that's our theory right now. And this maybe sets up something interesting for us to look at down the road, is to see how does this same group, get recover from this, or how do they perform, let's say a week, 2 weeks, a month from now, 2 months from now, in comparison to the participating group. I think there's certainly an argument to be made that the participating group now have a leg up in some of their categories, and they can continue to build on that if they continue to invest. So it's
Yeah.
something interesting for us to look at.
Dennis is nicely teeing up our next data analysis poll here, is actually following these two groups as they continue, right? That we're going to answer this question within the next few minutes here about, is Prime Day worth it? But fundamentally, we're going to be tracking these two groups for a little bit of time here and really get a deeper understanding of how the impact that Prime Day had. So a LinkedIn Live coming to you in probably about 6 to 8 weeks here. But we'll get you in there. But stay tuned for that one as well, because it's there. We want to see the actual full tailwind effect of both those groups too, as well. So then, gents, is Prime Day worth it? We've seen the data. We saw the uptick in revenue. We saw the uptick in profit, the changes in BSR. We saw the brands that participated. What do we really feel here, right? Like, what are kind of some of the things we look at? And we've actually obviously had this discussion coming into this. This isn't random. And those three kind of call outs that came up to us. And let's look at this first one here. Participation rate should be higher. Dennis, why don't you talk to that? You've been kind of talking to the non-participant group here.
Yeah.
Tell me more about what you think here.
I think we've looked at the results, in a few different ways here, and in virtually every aspect, there's some advantage to the participating group as compared to the non-participant group. Yes, it comes, yes, there's effort involved, but at the end of the day, I think the concern that many brands have, that am I just, all the gains that I get through a Prime Day, am I just handing all of that over to the marketplace? I think we're concluding that the answer there is no. There's definite advantage, there's definite profit to be had, there's gains to be had to the brands that participate. So net, I should expect to see that participation rates should increase over time, and probably are too low right now, and more brands maybe that are currently sitting on the sidelines arguably shouldn't be. So I would expect to see higher participation rates here going forward.
Yeah, like not every brand on the market is selling toothpaste,
Right.
right? So
Right.
arguably, and I think this shocked us the most here, that really only 55%. That's a lower number. There's definitely an opportunity with Prime Day in terms of the overall numbers and kind of the tailwinds, even on the BSR standpoint there too.
Yeah.
But more so than anything, non-participants will still see a lift.
Right.
And I know, Teja, you've been talking a lot more about the participants, but what you had a perspective here that was interesting.
I think it is, don't play into the FOMO as well to a certain extent, right? If you as a brand, it doesn't make sense, you don't have the margins, or it's an everyday product and people are going to buy it regardless, right? Don't follow the herd and do more discounts and actually lose money and give that money back to the marketplace. Just ride the organic wave and piggyback off of it, because at least you're going to sell year round long, right? So I wouldn't stress too much about it, but because you're still going to see that lift regardless.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point, right? Like no war room, no months of planning. Right? I can just say, hey, let me just adjust my budgets ever so slightly, or not do anything at all, and still see the same lift, right? Like there is a lot of allure to
Not
that.
the same lift, but a lift. Yes, you see a lift.
But at least you're stress free, you're relaxed,
Right.
enjoying
Yeah.
a nice cup of coffee,
Yes.
Yeah.
and just ride it.
Right.
Yeah, it would drastically change like 3 months of the year, right? Resource allocation planning, inventory planning, all of that. It's like we're just going to do more of the same. We'll stock up a bit more, and we'll keep going, and things will be good. And I know, Teja, one of the brands you work with was actually did exactly that,
Exactly.
if
Not
not
just
more.
one, right? A lot of those brands, that 40% who just weren't participating, it just fundamentally doesn't make sense for them to do it. So
Yeah.
they were
And
chilling.
maybe you're set up well with your supply chain and you've got good sell through rates and basically the machine is flowing nicely and you're not dealing with a lot of overstock type of situations or what have you. So it can definitely make sense to take the easier path here and just ride the wave and see some uplift, but maybe not to the same degree as the participating group.
But that easier path is really just kind of the lead up to Prime Day, and kind of like if I look at the non-participants here, the lead out is drastically different, right? Like now the war really begins, right? Where I need to get my rank back. I need to get my products coming back onto that first page, get my rank into a position, especially because if you think about it and jogging this back, these were the best selling products for brands.
Right. Exactly.
Right. And so my best sellers now rank worse, albeit I have more money, and could I use that money for the war chest to get my products back to where they were before?
Yeah.
Right. Whereas the participants actually saw great tailwinds on increasing their rank, which in turn will increase their sales velocity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, while also still making more money, while also still seeing that. And so this debate and this dissonance of like yes or no, is a little bit more challenging, right? Like it's a little bit more challenging to be able to make that assertion, because whether you decide to fight the Prime Day war or the post Prime Day war, is the decision.
Right. And I think that'll be really, really interesting for us to kind of look back on, because if we find that the non-participating groups, having given up that ground on BSR, struggle for a length of time afterwards, then that could be argument enough that as much as maybe you don't need it for kind of burning down your inventory, maybe you don't need it for a number of reasons, but you do need it in order to sustain your position in the category and your BSR rank, and that could be reason enough that you need to lean into it.
So fundamentally, then, to answer this question, is Prime Day worth it? You've probably seen this answer from me before, and you'll see it from me again. And we'll get you more clarity and more definition when we get a longer tail into the data. But it depends. It fundamentally depends, right? And everything we've put together here is a framework for you to be able to evaluate for your brand that is this worth it for me? Is this worth it for what we're trying to do? Look at your GMV, look at your profit, look at your BSR, look at the changes, and then be able to make that claim for yourself. Your margins, your inventory planning, your ability to do all these things. And as much as it's not the answer that everyone wants the definitive yes or no, it does depend. And we're going to track the tailwind of this data for the next couple months here as well, and bring this conversation up again, because it is important. It's important to see how the impact that it has on your business, not just for 10 days, but for 90, for 60, for the rest of the year. And so we're going to be looking at this again. It does depend. You hate me for saying it, but it's true. You've got the framework. We debated this back and forth. This slide changed from a yes to a no, to a yes to a no, to a yes to a no, and then a no to a yes to a depends, because it is nuanced.
So we're firmly on the fence, is what we're saying.
Yeah, we're firmly on the fence. Yeah,
on the fence.
Yeah, 5 out of 10. Right in the middle. Everyone likes to be right in the middle, but it's an interesting. It's the framework that's the most important. It's the framework to be able to evaluate for yourself, and we're honestly happy to be able to do that for you. Right? If anyone does want to hit us up, I'm gonna post a little link here as well. But you can book a meeting with myself. We'll happily look at your data, happily give you that analysis, happily give you is it worth it for you? Whether it be myself, I've put my meeting link down here. For those that were here last time, this meeting link was like 150 characters. So we got a short one here. Go trellis.com/Ali. We're here to support. We're here to help you answer that question for your brand. and we're more than happy to do it. And we have the data to support that as well. So, gents, friends, thank you both for joining us. You got the OGs of Trellis right here. This is a topical one. This obviously is a topical one, but this data was not an easy feat to sort through. And so I appreciate you both. I appreciate the energy put in, and I know that everyone watching and all the brands that you both supported on Prime Day, whether they participated or not, super appreciate you guys. So I'm going to do a double down here on a thank you from all the brands. And thank you for me personally as well for making this Prime Day go off without a hitch, be successful, and also help inform the brands as to what they should be doing more. So thank you both.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having us, Ali. I think it was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot in the process too, just
Yeah.
sifting through the data. So it was great.
There was some fun tidbits there. And Teja, we're going to have you more. This was your first one coming out to the world here on the Trellis Lives, and so we're going to have you back again. There's some elements in here that I think are really powerful, and you bring a lot of knowledge to the table for all of us.
Appreciate the tee up there, Ali. Always a pleasure. Great having conversations with you, and I think there's a lot more to come. Right? You got Black Friday, Cyber Monday, October Prime.
That's it. More content coming in hot from us. But again, to everyone watching, everyone who did watch, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the day. Friday is a short 48 hours away. And then the next Prime Day is a few months out. So start thinking about that. But once again, thank you all. Have a great one.
Cheers. Thanks.
Everybody. Cheers.